Hi everybody, and welcome back to Murder at Bedtime with me, your host Lyndon. This is a 15 to 20 minute no frills, no waffle, true crime bedtime story with a big thank you this week to the lovely Lindsay from Stolen From Me YouTube channel's mum, Christine, for suggesting this story to me, the Great Yarmouth Bootlace murder. So let's get serious and get cracking. As you already know, the waffle is all at the end. When 14-year-old John Norton arrived on Great Yarmouth South Beach for an early morning swim on the 22nd of September 1900, the last thing he was expecting to find was the lifeless body of a young lady with her clothing disturbed and her legs drawn up with a knotted bootlace around her neck. He ran off to inform the police, and of course they returned mob-handed and proceeded to destroy the crime scene, as was normal in those days before forensics. There was no identification on her apart from some laundry labels in her clothing. At row 104 off the South Quay in Rudram's boarding house, John Rudram, the owner, was becoming a bit twitchy. His boarder and Mrs. Hood had gone out for the evening, leaving her 3-year-old daughter Rose, or Ruby, whichever report you read, in their room alone and had not returned. She had been out for the last 8 nights, meeting her brother-in-law, she had said. John Rudram made his way to the police station, where he identified the recently brought in lady on the beach, which indeed was his, Mrs. Hood. A search of the belongings in the house unearthed more laundry labels with the number 599 on them, a return ticket from London, and a photo taken recently by a beach photographer with Mrs. Hood wearing a distinctive chain with a watch on it around her neck, and that was propped up on the mantelpiece. The chain and watch could, however, not be located. Mrs. Hood was found to have had sex with or without consent and had been strangled with a mohair bootlace with 2 distinctive knots, a reef knot and a granny knot. It took 3 weeks before the local police admitted defeat and handed the case over to Scotland Yard, where brilliant and patient work by the lead detective, Chief Inspector Leach, tracked down the labels to a laundry in Bexley Heath, London, and the account was held by a Mary Jane Bennett, and strangely enough, the laundry was still receiving garments for that account. After being shown a photograph of Mrs. Hood, the manager confirmed that this was Mrs. Bennett, and far from being a widow, Mrs. Hood / Bennett husband was very much alive and kicking with a young parlourmaid called Alice Meadows, who he had met while living in Woolwich so he could be nearer his work at Woolwich Armoury, or so he told his wife. Now, Herbert Meadows was quite an unsavoury character who was a confidence trickster and swindler. He and his now deceased wife, who was by no means white as the driven snow, had quite a lucrative business in buying old junk violins and selling them off to people as top-of-the-range instruments. Now, she being a music teacher, she knew quite a bit about violins. With their ill-gotten gains, they managed to afford to buy a grocer's shop, but it mysteriously burnt down within weeks. The insurance company smelt a rat, but couldn't prove it, so paid out a reduced payment. But as the pair hadn't paid for any of the stock in the shop yet, they still came away with a tidy sum. Mysteriously, with this money, they left their daughter in care and caught a ship to South Africa, where weirdly they only spent 4 days, then sailed back again. The reason for this was never discovered. But whatever happened on this trip soured the relationship, and they started to argue frequently, according to their neighbours. One time, Mary telling her husband she had so much on him he would get 15 years if she told. And he told her, "I wish you were dead, and if you're not careful, you will be." Once again, according to the neighbours. It wasn't long before the police had what seemed overwhelming circumstantial evidence against Herbert and arrested him for his wife's murder. They believed he had told his wife they should go on a little holiday and try and work things out and get their marriage back on track. She was to book into a boarding house under an assumed name, Mrs. Hood. Mr. and Mrs. Hood were names that they had used before, and he would join them in a few days. He then told his lover Alice that he had family business looking after his grandfather in Gravesend on the Thursday before the murder, and he wouldn't be able to see her for their usual Saturday date. He then caught a train to Great Yarmouth, booked into the Crown and Anchor pub in Great Yarmouth for one night, the very same pub that he and Alice Meadows had stayed in August, where he proposed to her. He then met up with his wife in the evening, took her to the beach, had sex with her, then murdered her. Took the chain and watch, then travelled back to London on the 7:30 a.m. train, then went to see Alice and told her he was back early because he was in the way in Gravesend. He then went and cancelled his wife and daughter's house rental, saying they had gone to live in York. He gave Alice a load of his wife's clothing with the laundry label on, saying they had been given to him by a cousin. And he sold his wife's piano and bicycle to a friend. Searching Bennett's lodgings, they found a pendant watch and gold chain which was very similar to the one on the photograph taken in Great Yarmouth, where Mary Jane Bennett was seen to be wearing it. The circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The trial started in February of 1901, and the behaviour of the press and the witnesses was absolutely despicable. The press paying witnesses for their statements before they even gave them in court. Innocent or guilty, the man had no chance of a fair trial. The legendary barrister Edward Marshall Hall, defending Bennett, managed to get the case tried in London rather than Norwich. But as hard as he fought for his client, even he couldn't work his magic this time. The gold watch and the chain, and the fact he kept on insisting that he had never been to Great Yarmouth, was the clincher in the case. The evidence from Alice Burrows that she had been duped by him seemed to affect him the most, and he didn't give evidence in his own defence. Of course, he was found guilty of his wife's murder and sentenced to death. He continued to plead his innocence to the end, but was hanged at Norwich Jail on the 21st of March 1901 by James Billington. Now, the evidence, I don't believe, would have stood up today. If DNA had existed, Bennett would have been let off or straight away or convicted. But other questions went unanswered. How was it that Woolwich Armoury had a log of him working on the day of the murder? A friend said he had been drinking with him on the night of the murder in South London. Other mutual friends said Mary Ann had 2 identical watch and chains. If they were going on a family holiday, why did she have to book in under a false name, claim she was a widow and was from York? And who was the mysterious brother-in-law that met her the other 7 days of her holiday? Why was there sand in her mouth? If it was her husband having sex with her on the beach, why would he have to stifle her screams with his hand, which is how the police presumed the sand had got there? It's true, there was a lot of evidence pointing to him being guilty. But reasonable doubt? I think so. But not according to the BBC TV programme Murder, Mystery and My Family. This is where a family member of the person executed has his or her case taken up by 2 top lawyers who reinvestigate, one for the defence, one for the prosecution. They then take their findings in front of a retired judge and he gives his decision whether he finds the sentence safe or unsafe. Now, I must admit I was surprised when he found it safe, but then I've disagreed with a few episodes, but it's good TV. But especially as 12 years after Mary Jane Bennett was murdered on the exact same beach, 18-year-old Dora Green was sexually abused and strangled with a mohair bootlace tied with a reef knot, and the murderer was never found. As always, I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think he's innocent, or did they hang the right man? Anyway, it's that time. It's waffle time. So it's good night to anyone who is wise enough to be going to sleep. And if not, here you are. You are a bedtime, murder at bedtime, murder masochist member. Please let me know which one you are. If you do watch my channel, please subscribe. It really does help. I've never wanted to be massive or make any money out of this, but to get to 1,000 subscribers would really make an old man so happy. So please subscribe. It costs nothing, and ding the bell so that you get notifications when a new episode is out. The podcast looks after itself, and at the moment I am storming the charts in Malaysia. So thank you so much, my listeners in Malaysia, and please give my little TikToks a listen. Interesting little stories in less than 3 minutes. As always, I'd like to give a shout out to my 3 favourite ladies. Lindsay from Stolen From Me, who has done so much for me, and good luck to her with her new Creepy Stories episodes as well. Gisela from Grizzly Books, who also helps me out with a load of stuff and sends me amazing hand-painted goodies and chocolate. Amazing lady. Debbie Q from The Right Shoe podcast, who has helped me in so many ways and never fails to make me laugh. And I've really enjoyed our collaborations. So what's happening? Well, I'm being interviewed this Wednesday night on the Grizzly Books True Crime YouTube live stream. I believe at 8 PM UK time. So please join in and ask me questions, whatever you like. Also, I will be one of the case file team on Saturday again with Grizzly Books about the Susie Lamplugh case. Please check out Grizzly Books for times and hope to see you there. This week I'd like to give a shout out to Danielle Lime of True Crime Lime podcast. She's a relatively new podcaster with a great podcast, and anybody who knows me knows I like to give independent new podcasters a bit of help, if I can, as I know how hard it is when you are getting started. So, if possible, please give her channel a listen and subscribe. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the lovely Boujou, who runs the little coffee van parked in the nursery/old cricket pavilion entrance on Watermead Spine Road in Aylesbury. She serves a great panini and latte, and the free biscuits and water for the dogs is a lovely touch. You can't beat visiting her when you're taking a walk round the lake, so please support her. Finally, I went to see Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, or OMD, with altered images of support at the weekend. Now, wow, what a gig. I never knew they were that good. One last thing. I always listen to you, my amazing followers, and you seem to like the old ambient backdrops, so I'm going back to them. Anyway, I think that's enough of my gobbledygook for this week, so sleep well. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please let me know, and I will see you next time. Night night.